TFA fam, what is going on? Hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for coming in and tuning in to another video on the Fantasy Authority YouTube. Me and Robbie are going to continue breaking down some of our favorite Dynasty buys for January. We are basing this off of DLF one quarterback ADP that just came out last week. Let's go ahead and just dive right into it. We're going to be talking about our buy highs for January. You know, normally you see your buy lows, your value buys. No one really wants to buy high, but I think if you time it right, it can work out in your favor. So, Robbie, lead things off for us. Tell us your first guy that you were buying high in January.
Just off the bat, I think when you're talking about buying high on players, you're obviously buying someone who's not cheap. That's kind of a given, but you're also buying someone who you think can continue to raise the bar. So I think that should be noticed right off the bat. And the first guy I'll pick is Joe Burrow. Now, this is a guy you talked about just briefly in our Dynasty Buy Low video as someone who we've seen an injury. We thought he's going to be out potentially like most of next year of 2021, maybe half the year. Well, now the timetables have started to come out and the progress, and we're looking at maybe it's not quite as bad as we originally thought. So maybe he's back for the beginning of the year. Maybe it's a couple weeks into the year. But I think that's the first thing to note about Joe Burrow is that we talk about injury discount. That's another term we threw out in our buy lows. That's something that you're going to get with Joe Burrow, and maybe that injury isn't quite as long as we originally thought. So, that's the first thing I like about him. The next thing is he basically was on, a passing yards, rushing TDs, his interceptions. He was on a consistent basis with Justin Herbert, who's a guy who just absolutely exploded in Dynasty. And now Justin Herbert's the QB5, QB6 in Dynasty. Which is just absolutely wild. I'd suggest you buy him, but you can't really go any higher at his price, right? So looking at Joe Burrow, I much prefer him at QB9. That's his January ADP because I think he even falls a little bit lower once we get Trevor Lawrence in, once we get Justin Fields. I think both of those players are probably right around him, probably above him, honestly, with the hype that they're getting as Dynasty quarterback prospects. And so if you talk about how he just stayed on par with Justin Herbert, the talent around him with T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, I'm invested in that Bengals offense to continue to take those steps forward to get better and better. I definitely think he can at least maintain his top 10 QB status, and he has a ceiling to go even higher.
Curious to see what his price ends up being specifically in Superflex leagues, over the next month or two, because that good news that you were talking about doesn't really seem like it's quote unquote mainstream. Yeah, right. I haven't gotten that buzz, going from that, which is a really big deal. But I'm going to keep things here in the AFC North with Nick Chubb. Chubb coming in at RB9 just feels disrespectfully low. I don't understand how, you ask anyone, they'll tell you that Chubb's a baller, but yet his fantasy value doesn't really, key up with that. The fact that guys like DeAndre Swift are already going ahead of him, I just don't understand. The big sticking point for a lot of people was Kareem Hunt, right? After the end of last year, everyone used those splits and said, well, look at what happened once Kareem Hunt entered the fold, which is fair because it was the only thing that we had to go off of. But I think we really saw, especially toward the last 5 weeks, the last 5 games that Cleveland played, rather, you really saw Chubb kind of start to make the case of him, not being the 1A, but kind of just the one in that offense, and Kareem Hunt kind of coming in and just giving the offense just fresh legs in the running game, so to speak. If you look at what Chubb did over the entire season, he finishes an RB1 6 times in the 11 full games that he played. If you take out the week that he got hurt against Dallas, he had just 3 games where he didn't finish inside the top 16 at running back, and that was with basically no passing game involvement. He saw only 18 targets during the regular season. And like I said, the thing that's starting to get me excited about Chubb and why I think he's kind of starting to take that one versus, what that 1-2 role versus 1A, 1B was his passing game involvement. He saw 9 targets over their 2 playoff games against Pittsburgh and KC. Like I said, that was literally half of what he saw during the regular season. Over the last 5 games, so including the playoffs, Chubb out-touched Hunt 84-44, saw 17 targets to Hunt's 11, and ran 2 more routes than Hunt did. So, again, even if he's back, I don't think it's that big a deal. And I think you could potentially see a scenario where maybe a team takes a stab at Hunt, and they try to pull him away in a trade offer since he's kind of stayed on the narrow, so to speak, over the last season. So either way, Chubb, I would buy him high. RB9 is just too low. He should absolutely be in the top 5 running backs, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep on bringing things from the AFC North. We go from Cleveland to Cleveland's arch nemesis of recent weeks in Chase Claypool. They've had a little history recently. Chase Claypool is currently the wide receiver 24 in ADP, and so that's pretty high. But what I really look for in some dynasty buys is that those sophomores. Normally, the sophomore wide receivers have a really big value, and kind of Chase, just based on what he did last year, he doesn't have a great value, but that's why I want to buy high on him, because second-year wide receivers, I think he's of that same mold as DK Metcalf, as Terry McLaurin. Like if we look at these stats from second-year wide receivers going from their first year, DK Metcalf had 100 targets in his first season, 58 receptions, 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, 93 targets, 58 receptions, 919 yards, 7 touchdowns. So really similar. And then we go to Chase Claypool, 98 targets, 57 receptions, 772 yards, a little bit lower on the yards, but 8 touchdowns. So he's right there with those two guys who we saw explode into the top 5, top 6 wide receivers in their sophomore year. I think he's of that same mold, especially if we talk about what's going to happen in free agency. It looks like Juju Smith-Schuster is all but out the door. They didn't want to give him a contract here coming into the season. I just don't know if they keep him around. It seems like they probably won't keep him around, but I think that's a big opportunity for him to ascend. So, yeah, I'm big on Chase Claypool as he enters his sophomore season. We have to remember that these rookies didn't even really have an offseason. So what does Chase Claypool look like with his size, with his strength? I think that he can continue to grow and be a really good dynasty asset.
You kind of set me up for a couple segues. But you touched on 2 different things that for my last 2, but the last thing you mentioned was rookies. So I will stay with the rookies, and I'm going to go Cam Akers. He's going to be one of the more talked about players this offseason for good reason. Once McVay committed to him in week 13, or when he started to see the majority of those touches, Akers saw the 5th most carries from then until week 17, along with the 11th most rushing yards. And then in the playoffs, he averaged nearly 5 yards per carry on 46 attempts. And I think, and I hope, and I pray at this point, we can finally put to rest the Akers versus Henderson debate. Like, I don't think there's any debate to be had here. Do I think he completely goes away, Henderson, that is? No, but I think he's going to be more of the change of pace kind of back. We never saw McVay just give Henderson the workload that he gave Akers. We never saw that. I don't think Henderson had 20 carries at all over the last 2 years, and we saw Akers basically do that almost every game, at least get 15 carries, if not, he had a 28 or a 29 carry game too during that time from week 13 through the playoffs. So the one thing that I would like to see is Akers getting more involvement in the passing game. We really didn't see that. I think that is well within his skill set and his ability to do so. So if Akers can even get 70% of what we saw Gurley get under McVay, I think that his stock can only go up from here. He was RB16, I believe, in January's ADP. I think that goes up with what we saw in the playoffs, but he's somebody who I would absolutely be buying high on.
I'm going to round out my trio with my 3rd rookie. I think rookies are obviously highly priced because, well, they're young, but I think this player, along with my first 2, has room to continue to grow, and that's Antonio Gibson, who's running back 15 in January, DLF ADP. The first off thing, I think the best is yet to come because of what we saw from Washington's offense. That offense was horrendous. I don't know how Terry McLaurin was so good. Antonio Gibson was so good. Oh, J.D. McKissick happened to be good too. Logan Thomas was, the tight end 4. How did they have so much fantasy success, but their offense was 3rd worst in yards per game? So if that offense improves at all, I think the sky's the limit for a lot of these guys. And I think there's a lot of room to grow. So another thing I like about Gibson's outlook is that he's playing behind a really good offensive line that's going to continue to produce for him. They're not losing any of their pieces. So I really like him playing behind a line that's going to continue to have all of its pieces here in 2021. And then let's look at his targets. So obviously J.D. McKissic was that biggest threat to his workload in 2020, and he'll probably be around for 2021. But we saw that Gibson started to work more on the field in tandem with McKissic, and his targets just continued to grow. He averaged 16 touches throughout his entire season, but he averaged 18 and a half if you look at the second half of the season on. So I know that's only 3 more touches, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at fantasy production, all of those touches count. So just as Gibson continues to increase his snaps in his sophomore year and increase his production, I think he booms past running back 15. He was running back 13 this past year with splitting snaps with McKissic, and he probably still will a little bit, but we're talking about running back 13, and he's going at running back 15, and I think he just gets better from here.
I completely agree. And if for all of you who, listen and consume podcasts, I don't want to give too much away, but I will put the link to the description in the video below. Robbie and Tom just went over Antonio Gibson and their ranking disputes. You can check out the full set of rankings on the fantasyauthority.com. But Robbie, I just want to say that you are right, and CJ and Tom are absolutely wrong, and it's despicable. Honestly, I don't know if we can have them around anymore. But that's all I'll say. You set me up for another segue unknowingly. The guy you just touched on, a guy that I agree with everything you said about the Washington offense. So I am bringing Terry McLaurin to the table. I'll keep this one brief. McLaurin has put up 2,000 yards in his first 2 seasons playing with Dwayne Haskins, Case Keenum, Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, and Taylor Heinicke. I could literally just end it on that. But this past year, McLaurin was one of 8 receivers to have at least 25% of their team's target share and 35% of the air yards in an offense. I think we have to assume that Washington makes a push for above average quarterback play in 2021, considering how well their defense played. I really don't see Rivera, kind of dicking around and trying to, get a round 2 kind of rookie. They're obviously going to be out of round 1 range. They have enough holes that I don't see them really trading up in the draft and making a big splash that way. So I think they bring someone in to help solidify that quarterback room. And, despite McLaurin coming in at wide receiver 11 in ADP for January, I really don't think you have to pay like the top 10 prices in order to get him. So I think he's somebody on the rise. He's really impressed me. I think he's kind of getting to that fringe kind of like matchup proof almost. And obviously if they can get the quarterback in there, maybe even add a piece of that offensive line, because it was good, but I do think it could be better. I think big things are coming in for Terry McLaurin and this Washington offense as a whole. That's going to wrap it up for the Dynasty by Highs for January. We appreciate you guys joining us. Any questions you have, any comments, please drop them in the comments below. Like I said, make sure you check out the TFA Dyno show. I'll put the link to the episode in the description below. Appreciate you guys joining us, and keep your eyes peeled for the next set of videos.